Oh, okay. Good point. We're recording the meeting. I think we're just going to record the presentation portion, and the disc breakout rooms we won't be recording. So just for your knowledge. But it's with great pleasure I get to introduce Mallory Rice and Dax Osgood, who are wonderful speakers who've kind of agreed to come along and share their work on Instructor Talk and promoting a positive learning environment. Mallory Rice is currently wrapping up her postdoc with Kimberly Tanner over in San Francisco State, where she's investigating student and faculty perceptions of inclusive and exclusive instructional practices. She'll be starting as an assistant professor of biology next month in CSU in San Marcos. Where her lab will be investigating inclusive pedagogy in the science courses and aims to reduce retention gaps, which is pretty awesome. And Dax Ovid is currently working at the Science Education Partnership and Assessment Laboratory, or CPAL, lab in San Francisco State University, where she's doing research with secondary school science teachers and science spotlights curriculum, as well as with biology graduate students learning data science. And with that brief introduction, it's been a great pleasure. I hand it over to Mallory and Dax.
Great. Neil, thank you so much for the introduction, and Chrissy, thank you for the invitation to join the NIST Happy Hour. I'm Dax, as Neil mentioned, and I'm joined today with Mallory. We'll introduce ourselves in a little bit. First, I just want to give everyone a heads up that it's going to be an interactive workshop, so have the chat ready, have your polls at the ready, keep an eye out for those, and we'll also be doing breakout rooms. And we hope that you're engaging with your colleagues in respectful ways, making sure everyone has a chance to share and listening actively throughout the workshop. So thank you so much for your presence this Friday afternoon, June 18th, on the eve of Juneteenth. And I'm wishing you all well for the weekend ahead. And let's get started talking about Instructor Talk. So in a moment, we'll do breakout rooms and then a chat blast. And in breakout rooms, we're going to ask you to take 5 minutes to share your name and affiliation, something important about who you are and what you value. And this can be where you're from, it can be your preferred pronouns, your cultural heritage, etc. And lastly, what is one thing that you remember an instructor saying to your class that wasn't related to content? So take a moment you can start to write down your ideas on this as we get breakout rooms ready. All right. And in the breakout rooms, the person with the first name closest to the letter Z will share first. So we'll go in reverse alphabetical order. And again, make sure everyone has a chance to share. And Mallory, would you launch the breakout rooms, please?
Yeah, and how about 5 minutes?
5 minutes, yeah.
Enjoy your colleagues.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I invite you to take a moment to write in the chat your memory of something that an instructor said that wasn't related to content. And share it and send it when you're ready. So we've set up the course so that's possible for everyone to get an A. I don't give pointy grades, instructors who make a big deal of students who receive 100%. You need to start exercising, you're getting older and it's time to stop taking your health for granted. All kinds of things. It looks like that people are remembering. Entertaining stories, wear sunscreen. sharing weekly updates on wedding plans. Yeah, there are things that I think we can take at least this little sample of people who are here today that we remember the things instructors say. And so just a quick poll. I'd love to hear who's in the room, and we can respond to the different kinds of positions that people are in and acknowledge the many different types of ways in which we contribute to student learning. All right. I'll close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the vast majority of people, we got about over 80% who are faculty, instructors. Welcome. This is a great talk to be at for postdoctoral scholars who are interested in research. Please feel welcome to touch base with me and Mallory, who are coming out of our postdocs right now. And staff and administrators, thank you so much for joining us today. So, quick introduction. My name's Dax Ovid. I use they, them, and welcome she, her pronouns. And what motivates me in this work is just the countless stories I hear from students of things that their instructors say that have, for the most part, the stories I hear negatively impact their learning environment. And so I'm deeply committed to thinking of ways that we as instructors can be responsible for the language we use and the impact it has on students in the short and the long term. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the funding, the support, and the community of the Biology Scholars Program at UC Berkeley, and also for the Science Education Partnership and Assessment Laboratory peers, where I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Mallory Rice, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hey everyone, my name is Mallory. I use she, her pronouns. I am formally trained as a marine scientist, so my graduate work was really looking at how humans influence coral reefs in Moorea, French Polynesia. So I spent a lot of time in the field, but I also spent a lot of time teaching and getting trained in inclusive pedagogy and evidence-based teaching practices while a graduate student. And once I learned that I could conduct biology education research, I pivoted strongly in that direction for my postdoc work and will be starting my lab at CSU San Marcos next month to really investigate inclusive and equitable pedagogy in courses across STEM.
Great. So we've used this term a few times. What is Instructor Talk? The way it's been defined by the Instructor Talk team listed here on the right is that it's language that's used by an instructor to the whole class that's not directly related to the concepts under study, but instead focuses on creating the learning environment. And so let me show you a few reasons why we study Instructor Talk. One reason is instructor immediacy. And according to this principle, there's a perceived psychological distance between instructors and students, and this may impact student learning. Another reason why is student resistance. Some of you may have experienced it or know colleagues who have when you're trying a new active learning strategy and students are like, hey, I'm not really interested in doing this. There may be language that instructors are using that primes students to be receptive or resistant to new strategies. And lastly, stereotype threat. Instructors can say things that negatively impact students and lead them to underperform on high stakes assessments. And so the language we use, the way we talk about exams and tests and who can perform well, all connects to this non-content language that is around the content that we're teaching and impacting how students are learning that content, one could argue. So given all of these reasons why we study Instructor Talk, how often do you think it even happens? I invite you to participate in this quick poll of how many instances of Instructor Talk do you think were detected in a 45 session semester long introductory biology course? So maybe less than one time, that'd be about 30, about twice per session, about 100, up to 1,000. So please make your prediction in the poll. How much Instructor Talk do you think in this one class was detected? I'll give 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, ending the poll. And it looks like you could get out a piece of toast, and because we got a spread here of different responses. The majority of people, about 30%, predicted around 100. And it looks like about 26% 250, 26% 500. So we got over 80% of us that think it's 500 or less. It turns out that, oops, double jumped. We have about over 650 instances that were detected and identified in this first course studied. And so I invite you to check out Shannon Seidel's initial study on this if you're interested in learning more about that. And the next study our team took on, they assessed 61 different courses and looked at what kinds of Instructor Talk were coming up, and developed a positively phrased and negatively phrased Instructor Talk framework. And in each of these frameworks, there's categories, there's subcategories of ways that the Instructor Talk could be described and categorized. Today, we're just focusing on those meta frameworks of positively phrased and negatively phrased. And if you're interested in getting into the nitty-gritty details, I invite you to check out Colin Harrison's paper for all the categories and subcategories of these frameworks. So it happens in classrooms. We detect different kinds and nuances of Instructor Talk, but how do students perceive Instructor Talk? To study their perceptions of examples, we gave students in our study a stimulus of 20 randomly selected Instructor Talk quotes that were from actual recordings in classrooms. 10 of these were coded as positively phrased by researchers, and the other 10 were coded as negatively phrased. Let me show you a couple examples. So for the positively phrased, we have, all right, I shared data from our class about how you guys kind of didn't do so well on the assessment last week, but it's okay, you know, we can always improve. An example for the negatively phrased is, so we'll see if this is our new class size, if I've managed to scare people away, or if this is just people being tardy. So we presented students with a total of 20 quotes and asked them, do you perceive these as promoting a positive or a negative learning environment? And so I invite you to take a moment and reflect. Would you consider the instructor language that you shared at the beginning of this workshop as promoting a positive or a negative learning environment? And if so, why? So how do students overall evaluate these 20 Instructor Talk quotes, 10 of which are deemed to be or coded as positively phrased by researchers, and the other 10 were categorized as negatively phrased. And so we're about to show you a box plot, but we'd like you to, again, make a prediction. If a student chose all positive, then a scatter plot point would appear at around +10. And if the student chose all negative, then the scatter plot point would appear around -10. So given the spectrum of students in total agreement on positive or negative, or maybe not sure, hovering around 0, where on the spectrum might students have overall evaluated the positively phrased Instructor Talk quotes? If you want to type a number in the chat, you're welcome to. All right, we got 6, 5, 8. So we're thinking, for the most part, students are thinking positive quotes that researchers coded as positively phrased. We're in alignment. So also make a prediction, if you would. Where on the spectrum do you think students overall evaluated the negatively phrased Instructor Talk quotes? Do you think that they maybe were being generous in how they interpreted the language? All right, a lot of people are thinking -10. They think they see those negative quotes, they know they're negative. All right, 9. So we got a little bit of a spread there. So for the positively phrased, overall, students tended to assess them as positive. And for the negatively phrased quotes, students overall tended to assess them as negative. And if we were to do a statistical comparison, a two-sided Wilcoxon rank test, we found a significant difference between the clusterings of how students coded the positively phrased Instructor Talk quotes overall and the negatively phrased Instructor Talk quotes overall. So the big takeaway that I hope that you all remember from today's workshop is that overall, students are in alignment with researchers in how they evaluated these 20 randomly selected Instructor Talk quotes. However, we are all astute observers and we might notice there is quite a bit of spread here, isn't there? So some Instructor Talk quotes had more student researcher alignment than others. And we're going to take a look at a few of these examples today. So I'll pass it over to Mallory to lead us in our activities.
All right, thank you, Dax. So overall, right, students and researchers are pretty well in alignment for our perceptions of Instructor Talk. However, let me get the chat because it's disappeared. There are some exceptions. And so what we're going to ask you all to do is we'll paste this all in your chat box in just a moment. But we're going to give you a link in the chat box and we're going to ask one person to share their screen because we're going to do a sorting activity. So when you get to that link that will soon be pasted in the chat box, first make sure it works, but then you can also move around each of the kind of blurbs. And if you need any assistance, please let us know and we'll come into your breakout room and help you out. And we're going to ask that you read over the 6 examples of Instructor Talk quotes from our stimulus set that we gave to students. And, go around, have one person in your breakout room read the first one, starting with quote A, and read it out loud and decide if you were a student, where would you place this? Does it promote a positive learning environment or a negative learning environment? And we're going to ask that the person who last drank coffee reads the first quote. So starting with quote A. So Dax has kindly pasted all of the information we need in the chat box. So if you just click on that link, it'll take you to a flippity activity. So you can move these around. The directions are also on there. So you have everything you need. We're going to let you in these breakout rooms for about 12 minutes or so. We'll give you a warning at the halfway mark. And then if you have any questions or any technology trouble, please just ping us and we can come into the breakout room. And we'll pop into a couple to have a couple of group share. All right, I think everyone is assigned to a room. All right, so we will see you in about 12 minutes. I hope that was enough time. That might be too much or too little, depending on how fast you kind of discuss some of those quotes. That's okay. We're gonna kind of zoom in and focus on a couple of quotes. So I'm gonna ask you all to make a prediction. Brenda, perfect amount of time. That's ideal planning. Glad to hear that. So we're gonna ask you to make a prediction. How did your group categorize the following quote? So this is quote A. It says, all right, so the volume is dying down, which leads me to suggest that we're going to start talking about what happened over the weekend rather than the assignment. So let's see what we came up with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick on people. Did your group decide that this was a positive learning environment, negative learning environment, or maybe you're not sure, and that's totally okay. There's no right or wrong answers. You are all such fast voters. All right, so I'm going to give it 5 more seconds. We have 2 more folks. All right, I'm going to close the poll. So it's great that there are different opinions here. So try and remember these numbers. So 80% of us perceive this to promote a negative learning environment. about 5% a positive learning environment, 14% not sure. So 80% of us think negative, 20% are not really sure or think it might promote a positive learning environment. So keep that in the back of your mind. We're going to talk about this quote a bit more soon. Right, so what about quote B? So this one says, I take credit for only 5% of your grade or less than that. Your grade, whether it's an A, B, or C, whatever it is, 95% of it is yours, your contribution. So how did your groups rate this one as promoting positive or negative learning environment? Marcos is sharing in the chat that it's negative. Yeah, so there are some folks that agree with you. So we'll give it about 5 more seconds. We put it as mixed is what Tanya said. Yeah, that's very interesting. All right, so I'm going to close the poll. And I'm going to share these results. So there's not a lot of consensus, and we're kind of really split pretty evenly between whether it promotes positive learning environment, negative, or whether we're unsure. That's the vast majority of us. And some folks are sharing in the chat, right? It's hard to categorize these without more context, right? Tone probably makes a big difference. And that so much of it does depend on that delivery. Or it's really interesting, Pamela says, I felt that students would see it differently than maybe our point of view as faculty and instructors. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to share with you some of the results of our study, which are actually currently submitted to CVE LSE for publication. So these are the quotes we shared with you. 3 of them were categorized as positively phrased by researchers, and 3 of them were categorized as negatively phrased by researchers. So these 3 quotes are the positively phrased ones from the researcher perspective. And on the y-axis for this plot are how students evaluate it. So student perceptions of these quotes. So the first one was quote E. I think the labs are really cool and I'm excited for you guys to get to go through them. So students really thought that this was promoting a positive learning environment, right? That instructor is excited and passionate about what they're teaching. So there's really high alignment here. Quote D says, but the most important people in the room are not necessarily us, your instructors, they're actually the people sitting next to you. In this course, one of the most important things you can do is talk to the people who are next to you, figure out what's in your head and how to fix it if it's not quite right. And most students really appreciated this and thought that it would promote a positive learning environment because of that peer-to-peer interaction and connection that the instructor is facilitating. And I really want to drive home that the vast majority of quotes in our study had really high alignment between researchers and students. But there were some, which you explored, which we're not really sure on, or students had really misalignment with researchers. And one of them was quote A, right? All right, so the volume is dying down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick on people. Most students, similar to you all, thought that this would promote a really negative learning environment. And we'll keep that in the back of your mind. We'll kind of look at that later, but those numbers are really similar. Like over 80% of us thought that this was going to promote a negative learning environment. All right, so if we think about those 3 negatively phrased instructor talk quotes, again, from the researcher perspective, the y-axis stays the same, so it's the student evaluations or their perceptions of this language. There is, again, really high alignment. So quotes like quote F that you all looked at. So don't be giving me these random scales on your graphs that look funky, among other things. My poor little brain is really tired and I can't make any sense of it, okay? Or no, I could make sense of it, but I don't want to. Right, every student perceive this as promoting a really negative learning environment. For that instructor, not really seeming to care so much about the task at hand. Quote C, you don't need to sneak in, you're right on time for a change. Again, most students in really high alignment and perceiving this as promoting a really negative learning environment, minus a couple of students, which is interesting. But again, really high alignment between students and researchers' perception of this language. So this last quote, quote B, I take credit for only 5% of your grade or less than that, is what the instructor is saying to their students. Most students either thought it promoted a positive learning environment or were unsure. So really similar split to how you all responded in the poll that we just participated in. Right, and what we think is going on here is that students' perceptions of grades are typically positive because that's the benchmark for how students can enroll in other classes and pursue academic activities. But what if we had changed this language to really think about learning for the long term rather than thinking about points and grades? But I'm gonna help facilitate your learning of biology, so that way you're really prepared to treat your patients once you're in medical school. So really changing that language, how would that influence students in the long term and their perceptions of classroom learning? So what we're going to do is really focus on quote A. So this one that says, the volume is dying down, which leads me to suggest we're going to start talking about what happened over the weekend rather than the assignment. So let's see what we came up with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick on people. So we chose this quote to focus on because this had the most misalignment between students and researchers in our study. And in some of the discussions and rationales students shared in our study for why there was misalignment, they thought that talking about the weekend, might be perceived as negative, that they're making an assumption about what students are discussing in small groups. And right when I'm in a breakout room, I often discuss, how was your weekend? What did you do? What are your plans upcoming week? Like that small talk is really important for building relationships. But what really stuck out to students was this phrase, pick on people. And we're going to invite you just to reflect for a moment. How might you change the language? Sorry, it's only one quote, to promote a positive learning environment. So reflect for just one moment. How would you change this language to promote a positive learning environment? We're gonna take this conversation into breakout rooms and ask that you kind of discuss this prompt of how you might shift this language to promote a more positive learning environment. The person whose first name starts with A is going to share first, and we'll give you all about 5 minutes in breakout rooms to go through this prompt. And I see some really great questions in the chat, which we will absolutely get to once we bring you all back. All right, I'm going to open up the rooms. So we'll bring you back at 1:55 if you're in California time. About 5 minutes.
Zero social anxiety, so it's not like a student.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for taking time. And we have a volunteer that's going to share some of their approaches for how they might change this quote to promote a more positive learning environment. Karen, would you like to share some of what your group discussed?
So our group had tips. 2 of us at least have permanent teams and would encourage small talk that built team dynamics. One had cards and regularly chose a team and called multiple people to contribute instead of having to have the right answer. And I'll save the other ones for other teams to share because I can't remember.
All right, can we get one more volunteer to share their idea, or maybe change how you might phrase this kind of quote in the chat? You're welcome to do that as well.
Hello.
Yes.
We just invited people to when they came in to, top 3 people share your most wow moment of the weekend or something that really exciting happened to you this weekend, and then transition into the lesson. And if you can, make a connection to one of those wow moments to what you're teaching about. If possible. If not, just say thank you. Those were great. Can't wait to see what happens this next throughout the week or the next time we meet, and get to and then start the lesson.
I love that. So Keisha is saying, bring their lives right into the curriculum and what we're talking about in class, and integrate that into your class discussion. That's awesome. And then Marcos, do you want to share? And then we'll kind of wrap up to get everyone out on time.
Yeah, part of the thing about this comment is that it seems to me that it's coming from a deficit model, assuming that the students are not paying attention and talking about their weekend and that they are not going to participate, therefore he's going to pick on them. So I will say something like, all right, so the volume is dying down, which suggests that you have completed your discussion and reached consensus. I would like to now hear your thoughts. So I would like 3 volunteers to give us your ideas.
Yeah, so that is a great suggestion. So shifting the language to not have deficit language, but a growth mindset of you've completed this assignment. Thank you for your work. Who would like to share? And asking for volunteers. That's great. All right, so we've kind of talked about how small changes, right, in the language we use can really shift our learning environment. We also just want to leave with some action items, right? What can we take away from today? So when is the last time you all recorded yourself teaching or leading a discussion? How can you make a plan to do that soon? Perhaps you've been teaching online and you might have course recordings on Zoom that you can go back and look at. What kind of instructor talk are you using? What kind of learning environment might that be creating for students from their perspective? What non-content things are you saying? Why are you saying the things that you're saying? Is there anything that you're not saying now that you might want to purposefully add, such as shifting it from a deficit to a growth mindset language? And how can you use the Instructor Talk frameworks, which we're going to give you at the end of the workshop today, to be more really purposeful in what we say, and not just our classes in this, but other spaces we occupy. What are you saying after a seminar speaker speaks about their research? What are we saying in lab meetings? What are we saying in one-on-one meetings with mentees? And really being mindful of the language we show up in the science spaces we occupy beyond the classroom. We want to acknowledge we've got a lot of wonderful collaborators and supporters who have made this work possible, including our mentor, Dr. Kimberly Tanner at SF State. And we're going to end with an anonymous reflection survey. Just like in our teaching, we want to be very evidence-based and collect assessment evidence. So please take time to respond and share what you've learned with us in this session. And if you have any questions, please reach out via email to either Dax or myself or Twitter. So please reach out. We're very excited and open to collaborating and answering questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your presentation. I think probably one of the few presenters who actually, they finished dead on time to the hour, which is fantastic. I'd like to hope everyone can join in giving a big thank you for a wonderful discussion today.